Jeff,
Jeff, is that you?
So I can talk.
I think so.
we can hear
Oh, there
you.
you are. Yeah.
Hey,
Can you hear
guys
us,
me?
Jeff?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, I'm only audio at the moment. I'm working on the rest of it.
That's okay, as long as your audio, you can hear and participate, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't need to see you. We can't see Steve
Assuming you
either,
want me
unfortunately.
to.
Okay.
Can we start?
You're on, Larry. You're the boss.
All right. I want to welcome you all to the regular meeting of the Design Review Board on Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. The meeting is hereby called to order. First item on the agenda is, are there any staff communications to the board at this time?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair.
Somebody.
Paul.
He's chair.
Uh,
He's chair.
Not
Acting
yet.
Chair Paul. I did want to extend an apologies. I'm having difficulty with my video feed, so I apologize, but I do have audio, so and I can see you. So staff did have a few communications we wanted to start the meeting out with. One is we are working with a reduced sized board tonight. We do no longer have Chair Sadi. She is now an attendant at the Planning Commission, and alternate Blaney is out also. He is ill tonight, so we will be working with the remaining 4 members of the Design Review Board. Staff also requests that we continue the review of our last meeting minutes, November 4th of 2020. You'll remember that we had a 1-item agenda. Staff was also the note taker, and we believe that we prefer to continue this so that we can amend the record to better reflect the public comments that were presented during that meeting. So first item on the agenda, the consent item, we would prefer to pull, and we'll bring that back when we meet again. Likely it will be at the end of March. Staff wanted to bring to your attention that public comments were received after the distribution of the staff reports, which have all been forwarded to the DRB as separate emails, both yesterday and as well as today. We received 3 separate comments, written comments, one by Responsible Growth Marin. That was specific for agenda item 2. That has to do with the changes being proposed for the DARC. At that time, the Responsible Growth Marin is making suggestions that language of what qualifies for the DRC review needs further refinement, as well as language on the membership the DARC needs further refinement. Second communication that was passed out to the board later on today was from Victoria DeWitt, who's a West End neighborhood village resident. This also involved both agenda item 1 and agenda item 2. Ms. DeWitt also requested amendment of the last DRB meeting minute to specifically provide details of what was said by the 3 public members that did speak during that meeting, as well as Ms. DeWitt believes the authority of the DARC needs further refinement, and also the membership of the DARC also needs further refinement. Lastly, we received communications from Sustainable San Rafael in regards to agenda item number 3, which is the downtown precise plan. And in it, Sustainable San Rafael provided recommendations for what they believe is improving the draft downtown precise plan. That concludes staff's communications.
Are there any board communications to staff at this time?
No.
I had one question, Steve. If we're short
Please.
1 member, is there a requirement that we advertise and interview for another member, or because of this whole situation, are we going to try and get by with 4 people?
No, I
And an
believe we're
alternate.
going to move forward and try to find a replacement for former chair Sadi. So we'll be working on that in the future. It just, frankly, we were busy doing other things, but that
Oh,
will
sure,
be
sure.
something that'll be coming up in the future.
I
Well, we
can
could get
reach out. I know a few people who might be interested that are San Rafael residents, so.
And in the meantime, we could get by with Don as the alternate, right?
Right.
Good. Okay, next we'll move on to the meeting procedures. Due to the COVID-19 shelter-in-place order, we've had to establish new ways of conducting our public meetings, as you probably realize. I'd like to ask staff to address how public comment will work this evening in light of these new situations.
Thank you,
Steve?
Acting Chair Paul. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 17th, 2021 Design Review Board meeting. It is our first meeting of the new year. In addition to accepting written comments up to the Design Review Board meeting, staff is accepting public comments over the telephone at tonight's meeting. This meeting is being conducted online, audio only through Zoom. Members of the public are invited to participate via conference call at the following phone number: area code 669-900-9128, and entering in the meeting number 897-5942-0487#. If you are participating by telephone and wish to provide comments, please press *9. The chair will recognize you, and pressing *9 will raise your hand, a virtual hand. Once it's your turn, you've been recognized. The host, that's myself, will invite you to participate. At that time, you'll press *6 to unmute yourself. We ask that you introduce yourself and be respectful to the allotted 3 minutes times you have to speak and make comments. If you submitted comments prior to the meeting by email or letter, they have been forwarded to the Design Review Board.
Hey, Steve, let me ask you a question. Does the public, can they view this Zoom meeting or just only participate by a phone call? I mean, can they actually see us?
We are the only ones that see each other. It's all audio.
Oh, okay. The reason why I was thinking is because if there'd be some way for them to understand either ahead of time or during the meeting what those phone numbers are and the meeting IDs, because otherwise they'd have to write them down very quickly.
I can actually put them in the side. There's an area on the side, the right-hand side, that I can add notes.
But that the public can see?
Oh, no, of course it would not.
That's the people I'm concerned about.
Correct. No, I'm afraid I don't.
Yeah, okay.
But what I will do for the interest of the public is that prior to or after the introduction of each agenda item, I will recite the instructions again after each agenda item for each of the 4 agenda items.
That's good, but let me ask you this: when the DRB agenda is announced and sent out to the public or available to the public, is the phone number and the meeting ID shown?
Yes, it is.
So they can refer to that at any
Yes,
time.
they may.
Perfect. Good. Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Okay, let me now describe the meeting procedures. We're going to begin with a staff report for each agenda item. This is a study session, so no project applicant at this time, this particular meeting. Members of the public will then be invited to speak. Community members on the conference call can also speak when they receive the notification that they have been unmuted. You need to be unmuted by the host before you can speak, or else we won't hear you. Please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes. The board will then have the opportunity to ask questions of staff or the public after each segment. And then we will close the public hearing and bring the matter back to the board for discussion. Okay. All right. Now we're going to move on to the first public hearing agenda item for tonight. That's agenda item number 2. This is the project report on possible changes to the Design Review Board structure and processes to review and solicit feedback on proposed pilot program, creating a Design Review Advisory Committee that we nicknamed the DRAC, DRAC. Alice Cadiz is the planning manager, and so would you give us your staff report?
Yes, I will. Thank you, Chair Paul. Before I get started, I did want to mention that in the chat, I can see that a member of the public has indicated that if they log in, they're able to see the members and the presentation. So I'm glad to report that they are able to see.
Good.
So really quickly, I'm just going to give a background just as a reminder. On November 4th, your board received a presentation on a concept of establishing a design review advisory committee. And this was an idea that was conceptualized after significant public input that was from community members that was kind of directed by the city council as the city council directed staff to look for ways to either streamline the review process or find ways to remove barriers to housing production, or just find some, tweaks in our policies to figure out how we can simplify the development review process. So this was one of those ideas that was conceptualized during that time. And in fall of 2020, the city council directed staff to proceed with this idea and begin receiving input from the design review board and the planning commission. And the comments that were provided by the design review board and planning commission will then be forwarded to the city council at a future date. So in November 4th of 2020, your board was provided with this presentation and provided a number of comments. I'm just going to briefly go over those comments, as these comments were helpful in helping us draft the document that was attached to your report. So the comments included the idea of considering combining a planning commission and design review board to one meeting where the design review board would provide comments at a publicly noticed meeting. Your board also indicated that there was not an interest to having this DRAC process be applicable to larger housing projects and not applicable to non-residential projects. In addition, we heard from the public that they did not want to see controversial hillside development projects go through this DRAC process. We received feedback from your board regarding continuing the planning commission first concept, although some members were concerned that that might then result in more time. So looking into that a little bit more, we have been doing that. It has worked in that it flushes out some of the policy items. And so we'll likely continue doing that. Then the other thing that the board expressed an interest in was just really looking at the structure of the board being either a 3-member DRAC or just leaving it as is. And then the other idea was that the DRAC should have the ability to refer projects to the full design review board if there's an interest, whether it's size, controversy, that sort of thing. There was a deep concern about eliminating the public process from your board and from community members. And then something that came up was considering that we reduce the staff report content, and we'll be looking at that as well. So based on the input that your board provided, we included a draft concept design review advisory committee pilot program document that was part of your staff report. The design review board, the design review advisory committee membership would be made up of 2 members with 1 alternate. The DRAC membership would serve a 1-year term, and membership would be rotational. And so after that 1-year term, because this is a pilot program, we would kind of revisit and see what's worked, what hasn't worked, and make adjustments. And if it just isn't working, we would come back to the city council and with that explanation of why it's not working and what wasn't working. And if it is, why it was. So in terms of what the design review advisory committee would have authority over, and again, by authority, I mean they would have advisory review authority. A decision-making body would still have the final decision-making authority, but the DRAC would be able to review certain projects. And we basically picked these two types of projects out from the projects that the design review currently has authority over under the major projects design review projects list. So for new construction, the draft review would be limited to residential structures of 10 units or less. And again, this is from that major projects list. For related to additions to existing structures, the draft would be limited to reviewing additions to multifamily residential structures between 3 and 10 units. But it would also could not increase the unit count to more than 3 units. And the addition would constitute more than 40% of the square footage of the building. And the reason that's there and the reason it reads it's for more than 40% is that for projects that increase less than 40% are not subject to design review board consideration. And this one, I know that we received comments related to, this percentage. It could be that this number is adjusted to be like a range between 40 and 50%, for example. So that's something that we might, that we would ask feedback on. In terms of the number or how the meetings would be structured, the draft membership will be participating in a public meeting by the Planning Commission, or if the zoning administrator requests input from the draft, they would be participating in that meeting. This would reduce staff time on writing multiple reports, since they would all be combined into one report. Hearings would be provided in one notice, a combined notice that would disclose that the Planning Commission meeting would include membership of the draft to provide input on the design of the project. With this approach, the overall reduction in time would be approximately 1.5 months, given the amount of time that it takes to prepare reports, schedule the meeting, and then schedule the next meeting to the Planning Commission. So that's about a 1.5 months reduction, assuming everything stays the same. So notice, as I mentioned before, noticing for the Design Review Advisory Committee would be combined with the Planning Commission notification or zoning administrator notification. This is a 15-day notification that's provided prior to the meeting. And that's part of our code. And the notice would inform that this is a combined meeting and the Design Review Advisory Committee would be participating. And then in all of these instances, referrals could be made to the full board, and the referrals would be could be made by the director, by the Design Review Advisory Committee, or by the Planning Commission. And reasons for referrals could be, it just depends on the project. It could be the proposed design requires it's more complex and requires more feedback from the full board. It could be that the unusual size of the project is requiring more input, or just the unique surroundings of the proposed project just require a more thorough review by the full board. So that concludes my report. I'm interested in hearing your feedback, particularly just regarding the projects that the Design Review Board or Design Review Advisory Committee would have review authority over, but any other topic I'm interested in hearing from you as well.
Thank you, Alicia. Does the board have any questions of staff?
I do.
Go ahead,
I
Stuart.
want some clarity on the third item on the items that would not be eligible. The 40% one, does that apply to residential projects? As in single family?
That would only be for residential, right? It would only be, no, it would be for residential projects that are 3 units or more.
Oh, okay. That some clarity there would be great. I didn't see that. Okay, that makes sense. I was just concerned that if it was, say, a single family home where, I don't know, someone's got 1,000 square foot house and they want to add 400 square feet, that needs some more clarity.
No, and just to be clear, the list, the 2 items were taken from those areas where the Design Review Board currently has review authority over. So it's not, these aren't new items. They're just already part of the makeup of what your board has review authority over. So we just pulled the the ones that have the least, that, you know, kind of have the least, the lower level criteria. And so
Okay.
those were pulled out, and we didn't add anything new to it. It's already in the ordinance.
Thank you.
Any other questions of the staff? Sarah? Jeff?
I have a couple.
Okay,
you
go
hear me?
ahead. Yes.
First one on page 2, the staff report says there was substantial positive feedback from the community members. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about that, and that hasn't been my experience. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So the topic of kind of looking at housing and, you know, where we are in terms of our lack of housing production. The conversation started about 2.5 years ago at the city council level. So there have been a number of meetings where staff has provided reports and ideas, and the city council has asked staff to look at ways to you know, just reevaluate our procedures and think about, you know, ways that we can easily make changes to our procedures to address the lack of housing production. And so it's, you know, it's at city council meetings, it's during community meetings. There were a couple of community meetings that were held, I want to say in 2019. And so that's, you know, those were, there were several meetings. I want to say about 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 4, 5 meetings that occurred over the past couple, 2.5 years.
Okay, there were a lot of distractions here because I was trying to actually get on the meeting, and now I'm only on audio. And you had mentioned that that the process was slowed down by 1.5 months, and I was not able to catch what that was about. Yeah,
so in general, when we are scheduling design review board meetings and planning commission meetings, the time that it takes to send out notifications and prepare staff reports and then schedule meetings, the time between each meeting is about 1.5 months. So by combining the design review board advisory committee with a planning commission meeting, that would reduce the amount of time by about 1.5 months, because we wouldn't be having to schedule a meeting on top of another. So it's about 1.5 months reduction. It's probably a little bit more because the time that it takes to schedule the design review board meeting itself also takes about 1 month. So but in
So
general,
how is that different from having a draft meeting as opposed to a full board meeting? I mean, don't you have to go through the same process for the most part?
If you have a design review board meeting, you would be, the way this design review board meetings occur now is that we schedule a design review board meeting. We send out notifications, the meeting is held. And once that recommendation is made, then the next step is to find a meeting that's available for the planning commission and then schedule that, send out notices. So it would be different in that in the DRAC concept, the DRAC would be combined with the planning commission meeting. So it would be one combined meeting.
Well, I thought that was one option, but I thought there was also, I mean, when I read through this report, there's a lot of different permutation. There's like a combined DRAC with PC, there's a DRAC, there's a full DRB, there's the DRAC referring a meeting to the full DRB. So at this point, I'm just a little unclear on this. You know, it's supposed to streamline everything, but when I read through this, it actually sounds to me like it makes everything more complicated with all the various permutations. And
so if you look at the at item, let's see, where does it discuss the meeting? So if you look at item D on the first page of the exhibit, that's where it talks about how the meeting would occur. So the draft members will participate in a public hearing by the planning commission as may be required from time to time to provide the recommendations on the types of projects described. So it would be basically a combined meeting. It wouldn't be there wouldn't be a number of permutations. The way that staff is recommending this structure would be a combined meeting. And, you know, in those cases where the design review board or the director or the planning commission feels like there's a project that really merits the full review of the board, then there would be opportunity to refer to the full board. And, often as staff, we find situations where the review doesn't require board input, and we just feel like because of the project, because of its location, we seek out the board's review anyway, and we would continue to do that. But also at the Planning Commission and level, if there's something about the project that really would merit the full design review board, that could occur, and it could occur in different ways. The project could be approved with the condition that a final design review by the full board occurs after the Planning Commission decision. Or it could be a referral that would then come back to the Planning Commission for a final decision. It just
So
kind
if the draft had a combined meeting with the PC, then they would attend as a non-voting member of that meeting? Just,
Right.
they would
They would-
just give their comments?
Right. The draft would participate and provide comments on the design of the project only, and the Planning Commission would be the decision-making body.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board questions of staff?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
So I think I understand the program and concept, but the reality is that it's been underway for a quarter or maybe a quarter and a half, right? That it's been in use. And I was wondering if you have any statistics, or I guess I'm wondering about the volume of the different types of projects in these categories. Could you share maybe some of the projects that have gone under this process, and which one of those criteria, they kind of fall under?
Yeah, I mean, we did do some of that research. I think that it was more difficult than it's more complicated than it seems. There are so many different types of design reviews that we go through that, it's really complicated, breaking up the time frames that it takes between having to go through a design review process without DRB versus having to go through a design review process with DRB. We have been doing the subcommittee concept. Our recommendation is not that concept. Our recommendation is to have it more of a public process that would allow public participation before and during the meeting, where the public would get to hear what the DRAC is saying and would be able to participate and discuss design related items. I can share it with you what I have collected, just some numbers, so that you kind of get a sense of what it has looked like. So this represents the DRB number of days it takes for a DRB review versus the non-DRB review. 2015, 2018, 2019, and 2020. And you can see in 2020, there was a dramatic drop in the processing time, but there was also a slight drop in the processing time for non-DRB items from the 2018, 2019 review. But you can see that
Okay.
in the chart that there's a pretty dramatic drop with this process.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, so that's the number of days reviewed. I'm wondering about the volume, right? Because I guess I'm also anticipating that, or thinking that in 2020, just because of everything going on, the volume of projects went down significantly. And is that, if there's 10 projects that come through, and did 3 of them qualify for the advisory committee, or would all 10 of them, qualify to be only the committee process? I'm trying to get a sense of, of the number of projects that come in. Do 50%, fall into this smaller category, or do 80%? And if that hasn't been analyzed, that's fine. I was just trying to get a sense of the break.
Yeah, I have the raw numbers. I think, what if we can start collecting the public comments, and I can kind of see if I can dig up those numbers while we're doing the public comments.
Okay, thank you.
I can do that.
Any other board questions of the staff? Hearing none. Let's open up the public hearing and hear from the public comments. I think, Steve, are you going to open it up to the public comments?
Yes, I'll monitor it, but I wanted to quickly provide these instructions. I did provide them earlier at the beginning of our meeting, but I wanted to remind the public, and I will say this before each of when we open up for public comments on each of the items, I'll also say this again so that if there's any question whatsoever. If there's anybody out there on the conference call that wishes to provide public comments on this agenda item, please press *9 to virtually raise your hand. Once it's been your turn, you will hear a notification that the host is inviting you to participate. At that time, please press *6 to unmute yourself and begin speaking. Please introduce yourself and please be respectful of the allotted 3 minutes you're allowed to speak. While I wait for participants to press *9, I will also request public comments to be submitted through the chat. Evidently, we are now also monitoring the chat as well. So if you're just here to watch, but yet and prefer not to wait in the queue for to be identified and make your comments over the phone, you can also provide them through the chat, and we will go back and forth and try to also get them out there in the public record and have them responded to as well. With that said, I'm going to start from the top. And so Jay Hubert, would you like to unmute yourself, please?
Yes, I would. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jay.
Okay, I'm Jay Hubert. I'm president of the Dominican Neighborhood Association, and I would like to comment about the focus of this DRAC, and in particular is to remove barriers to housing production. And frankly, the kind of housing production we have in a single family oriented neighborhood is relatively small, but nonetheless, we would appreciate the opportunity to participate and provide public input on proposals within our neighborhood. And some of these proposals recently have been require more review, and we need the opportunity to do exactly that. And part of my concern about the DRAC is that although it claims not to take formal action on a project, nonetheless, projects can be approved without any formal review, given the way that the situation is structured. So I'm concerned about the opportunity for public input, the limitation of review to only 2 members of the DRAC. I understand there seem to be financial considerations and public notice concerns associated with that, but frankly, public input is exactly what's required, and limiting the input to only 2 members rather than 5 seems to restrict review and truncate the quality of the review process. So those are my concerns.
All right. Thank you, Jay. Last 4 digits of the telephone number 2995. You're invited to speak.
Hi, I'm Victoria DeWitt. I submitted a letter today for your review. And I had a question about Allie's comment at the beginning of the meeting where she said that the public had requested that controversial hillside projects not be included in DRAC. I just wondered where she got that comment or if I misunderstood, because as a member of the public, I have consistently requested that all hillside development go through the full 5-member design review board. On November 2nd, I issued a letter asking that the full 5-member board review hillside projects. I attached a prior letter signed by several residents of the West End Griffith Park neighborhood saying we support maintaining the full design review board hearings for hillside development. And in my current letter issued today, I say I support a full 5-member design review board to review hillside development, all hillside development applications. So I just wondered if Ally could clarify where she got that the public requested controversial hillside development, because I certainly didn't say that. I don't know if some other member of the public did. I'd just like her to clarify that. The second thing is that I was wondering if a member of the public can request referral to the full DRB. And I agree with some of Jeff Kent's comments about the complications. It does seem very complicated when I read through it. It doesn't seem like everything's been thought through. And then also the numbers for the 2020, where it shows that there's a drop in design review board hearings. And I don't know whether 2020 is really the best year to sample. I would expect there would be a major drop off given the situation of 2020 and the fact that the design review board meetings were impossible to hold. They weren't set up. It doesn't seem like they were really set up to be held online until fairly recently. So those are my comments, and I would like Ally to respond to my first comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. Last 4 digits on the telephone number.
Feedback might have something to do with Jeff's phone and being in twice. I don't know, Jeff, do you want to try muting and see if that like echo goes away and then popping in?
Sure.
Maybe. Are you on twice? Are you on a laptop also?
I don't know what I'm on, quite frankly.
Jeff.
I don't know. I'm throwing Jeff under the bus. It's not me.
All right, let's continue with the public comments. So last 4 digits of the telephone number, 8552. You're invited to speak.
Hello, on 8552, unmute yourself. *6. Is 8552 there?
We'll tell you what, we'll come back to 8552.
Yeah, why don't we move on?
The last 4 digits of the phone number, 0596. You're invited to speak.
Hello, can you hear
Hello?
me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, great. I hope I don't have conflict with my computer. My name is Shirley Fisher. I'm a member of Terra Linda Homeowners. I have attended your last meeting and this meeting. I have a number of questions which I hope that will be addressed tonight. The primary one is the possibility for public input in this process. I think the questions about what is the current track record with the subcommittee in terms of what projects were seen and how many times was the public involved in those. It's very unclear in this process. A project comes in, okay, it goes to DRAC. Where is the public notified? If DRAC goes to the Planning Commission, okay, you get a Planning Commission notification. If the DRAC goes to the zoning administrator, you get a zoning administrator notification, but there really isn't any design notification unless the project has already been seen and decided by DRAC and then goes off to someplace else. So I think the whole thing about public input early in the process is really not clear. A flow chart or something might be very helpful with this because it's not at all clear. Can the public request something to go to the full DRB? It appears that that can only be done by city staff or by the DRAC itself. So that's one major issue. The second issue, in terms of the membership of the DRAC, in both of our letters that you received, it was pointed out that if you have only one alternate, depending on which person in the DRAC of the 2-member committee is missing, you will end up with 2 people, either 2 architects or 2 landscape architects, which is not what you want. If you're going to be reviewing a project, you need one of each. So it seems that you would want to have 2 alternates so that you could fill in with the appropriate category of person. The other thing I think is really important is And this has been brought out consistently, and actually Design Review Board members brought it out yourselves at the last meeting, which is the cutoff of a project of 10 units. In some areas, it's not at all significant. In some areas, that's a huge number of units that could be added into a neighborhood that would definitely deserve design review, because what those 10 units look like can make all the difference to a neighborhood. So I think, again, whether a 10-unit project is significant or not is not covered by these new proposal. I think there are other things that are in the 2 letters that were submitted by Responsible Growth Marin and by Victoria DeWitt that really need addressing. And I'm hoping that the board members will be able to address those questions tonight. I hope you've had a chance to look at those letters and will be able to address some of those questions. And I'll be quiet now and listen for your answers.
Thank you, Shirley. Bill Carney, would you care to make some comments on this agenda item?
Bill, can you hear us? If you can, unmute yourself so you can speak. *6.
Why don't we'll continue to move and we'll come back to Bill as well.
Yeah.
Claire Hallenbach. Claire, are you interested in making a comment on this subject?
No, I'm just listening in. Thank you so much.
Okay. Is there anybody else that's interested in making a comment on this item tonight? Please press *9 to virtually raise a hand and you'll be called on. Okay. We'll send it back to the acting chair, Paul.
Well, seeing no further public comment, we're going to close the public hearing and then bring it back to the board members. If you have any questions of staff, first of all, after hearing the public comments. Any questions of staff?
I think we
None?
lost Jeff. I don't know who's running the hosting, but he might be in that waiting room. There is somebody that says Kent under attendees.
Well, he was having connecting problems, so.
Yeah, I don't know if he's just in there and we want to let him back in.
Can you unmute Jeff, Steve? Yeah.
Yes, he's unmuted.
All right, he's back.
Jeff, can you hear us?
Sorry, I'm having so many difficulties here. I'm having a hard time even following the meeting. So
Oh,
No, but you're good right now. Stay put.
that's the first time.
Jeff, did you have any questions of staff after the public hearing of the comments from the public?
No, I'm good on questions. Thank you.
Okay.
I have
How about
one
you, Sarah?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, on there was a comment about the hillside homes not being under review by the smaller board. And my understanding from the report was that they would be subject to the full DRB. Allie, can you speak to that?
Yes, so there's the limited number of projects that would be subject to where the Design Review Advisory Committee would have review authority over. The items that are not on this list that also are able to be reviewed by the Design Review Board are hillside lots that are within a certain distance of a ridge line. Not all hillside review is subject to Design Review Board oversight. So we, as I mentioned earlier, we're not proposing adding new applications that would now be subject to design review at all. It's all basically taken from that major projects list. And so if it's a listed item on the major projects list, it would still be subject to a full board unless it falls under those 2 categories that I mentioned. So here, let me just, I think it might be helpful to bring up the section. So these are the two areas where the design review board has review authority, and the yellow highlighted items are the areas where we're saying these are the two items where there would be that potential for draft review. So the top one where the first one under item 1, that's a residential structure within 100 feet of a vertical ridge, 100 vertical feet of a ridge line. Those would still be subject to the full board. We're not pulling that one out.
Okay, yeah, this is helpful. I'm sorry, my camera keeps freezing, so I turned it back
That's
on.
okay.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to respond. There were a couple of questions from the public. I'm happy to respond if your chair, if your board is interested in.
Go right ahead, Ally.
Okay. I wanted to mention that just to clarify regarding the structure, how the DRAC would participate. It would be a publicly noticed meeting. It would be at the Planning Commission level. The notification would be sent out with a comment that the DRAC would be participating in that meeting and would be providing feedback on the design. So the public would know that that was happening. And there wouldn't be a separate conversation that would be happening with the DRAC. It would be a very public discussion at a public hearing with the Planning Commission. So that would occur. In terms of the two alternates, we've thought of that. There is the potential for modifying that and having either two alternates or just having that third alternate be from a selection of the full DRB, depending on who's needed. If it's an architect that's not available or can't participate, we would look for an architect. If it's a landscape architect that is not available, then we would select from that. So that would, welcome your board's comments on that one as well. And then in response to, the concern being that in some areas where there's 10 units or less, that may be more of a concern versus another area where there's 10 units or less. And the DRAC pilot program addresses that by saying, if the Design Review Advisory Committee feels that there's a need for input from the full board because of its location or because of its size or other issues that might come up, then there would be that opportunity for allowing the full board to review. And if there's anything else I missed, I'm happy to address as well.
Sarah, did you have any other questions?
Nope, I'm all good. Thank you.
How about you, Stuart?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
I had a couple questions, Ali.
Okay, and I have a couple when possible.
Well, go ahead, Jeff.
So as I understand this now, the expectation is the majority of the meetings would be the DRAC meeting with the PC. And only there would be, the exceptions would be that the DRB would meet as a full group. Am I understanding that right?
No.
Okay, I
it's
have
just
to
those-
apologize. I missed so much of this meeting because of technical stuff, so I'm just trying to catch up.
So if you look at page 1 of the exhibit, under item A, where that identifies the review authority,
Right?
in that's where those projects that are listed in that would be subject to the DRAC. So it's residential structures of 10 units or less. And the reason that is, that basically was selected from the major projects list.
Okay.
And then, so it's just those two projects, those two types of projects.
Okay, thanks.
Anything else from you, Jeff, or
No, I'm good.
how about Stuart? You're good still?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, I had a couple questions, Ali. The makeup of the DRAC is one landscape architect, one architect, and then an alternate. Isn't the DRB typically 4 architects and 1 landscape architect?
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I think Don, board member Blaney, I believe, is an alternate, right? So he's a landscape, he
Right.
represents a landscape art, but yeah. So yes, correct.
Okay. And so the intention is that there are only 2 members of the DRAC, or is there 3?
It would be, so the proposed design review advisory committee pilot program identifies a membership of 3, with 2 being the active membership and then having an alternate. But that's one of the areas where we're asking feedback from your board on, would it make sense to just have it be a 2-person membership with selection being from the DRAC, from the full board, depending on what is needed. So that's, if you wanting to provide comment, we would welcome that on that.
Well, I guess that my question is that as the board is currently constituted, then this 3-member DRAC would be made up of 1 architect, 1 landscape architect, and an alternate who is also a landscape architect. Is that correct?
Could be a landscape architect or an architect.
Well, Don's the alternate right now, isn't he? Or do we have another alternate?
So the DRAC would be an alternate from the full board. It would basically be, you have, for example, if you have, say, board member Kent and board member Summers are participating in the DRAC,
Right.
and for some reason board member Summers cannot participate, we would select from either an already identified alternate board member, or we would select from,
Or it would be just another board member
right.
first. And if there were no other board members possible, then it would go to the board alternate, which would be, in this case, Don.
Correct.
So I guess technically, if we had, if Stuart and Jeff were the 2 members of the DRAC, and Stuart couldn't make it, it might first go to Sarah or myself before it went to Don. Is that correct?
Right. That's correct. And the other part of that is we're missing a board member. And so depending on what that membership would look like, so it could be that board member as well, or it just depends on what that next membership.
I guess my only question was, I think the intention of the DRAC was to have 1 architect and 1 landscape architect advising the planning commission. And if it were 2 landscape architects, by reason of everybody else bailing out, that may not serve the planning commission very well to have no architect opining on the architectural merits of the project. And I realize that both of our landscape architect board members are very well equipped in the design profession, but there could be an issue where it comes up that they would be sometimes not able to make a decision on or make a referral on that. So.
Or conversely, if there's a heavy landscape component, I rely heavily on those guys.
Right.
So, it almost should be a requirement that we have a landscape. If it's going to be down to 2, it's almost imperative we have a landscape person. I guess we're in question and answers, not in comments, right?
Right.
But
well, it sounds like
it's a little dicey, but we can get on with comments on that. So,
well, it sounds like the intention is to have 1 architect and 1 landscape architect all the time. And so, like you say, if it was a project that was heavily dependent upon landscape and there was no architect available, and it went to the alternate who was a landscape architect, that may work. So it's a little dicey, and I guess that's the whole point of the pilot program for 1 year, to see how it's going to shake out.
Well, it should go beyond intentions and be a requirement. We should make sure that those people are available. And, if those people aren't available, then the item gets continued.
Well, that's another question that I was going to ask, is how that happens if it does get continued. And then the third question I had was, if the DRAC didn't feel like it was appropriate to hear this in concert with the planning commission wanting to refer to the DRB, is that correct? How would that happen? In other words, if it gets scheduled to the DRAC Planning Commission meeting, and then the staff report goes out and the DRAC committee members say, you know what, I don't feel comfortable, we should refer to the DRB, is that going to cause a delay in the whole process? I mean, is there a way that the projects will come being proposed to the DRAC before it gets actually scheduled for a public hearing with the Planning Commission, that they have the opportunity to say, you know what, we don't feel comfortable with reviewing this right now, it should go to the full board? Is there a way to, how's that work?
So ultimately, the goal is to make this as public as possible. So I envision that if we, what a possible path might be is that when we send out notices, we would very likely send out notices to the DRAC as well. That could be one option. And that would provide that opportunity for the DRAC board member to say, or both of them say, we don't feel this is appropriate. We would like to request a review by the full board. And at that time we could, kind of hold off on the Planning Commission and instead schedule a DRB meeting. And in that case, it would just be, we're back to kind of doing it the old way, where the normal way.
But if you schedule it, if you send out the notification, isn't that basically scheduling this joint meeting? And
Yes.
to the public and to the Planning Commission and to the DRAC, and then if the DRAC comes back and says, you know what, we don't feel comfortable with that, doesn't that delay the whole thing? So, I mean, I'm
Yes.
wondering if there was a way prior to scheduling the meeting, prior to notifying the public, that you run it by preliminarily to the DRAC and say, you know what, we would like to have the DRAC participate in this joint Planning Commission meeting on this project. How do you, do you think that that's appropriate? And if so, great. And then everybody's on record that it's not going to be referred back to the DRB. And the
Yeah, and
whole
one
thing
way
could go forward.
One way we've done that is that we have, when we have projects that don't require full design review board review,
Mhm.
is we do actually reach out to design review board members and just say, hey, this is kind of a tricky design situation. It doesn't require design review board consideration, but we would like to hear your feedback.
Yeah.
We've had that from individual members. So that could be a way we handle that, where we reach out to individual members and say, hey, this is, technically under the DRAC, but we kind of, we're feeling like maybe we want your input on this, or just in general, just that's always the way we handle it. It's going to be referred to the Planning Commission DRAC combination, and but we're always seeking that initial feedback from the DRAC members. So that could be, I would.
Yeah, I think it would help actually to have that little heads up first before you go ahead and schedule a meeting, and then have the DRAC members feel uncomfortable and wanting to refer it back, because then the applicant, the public, the Planning Commission, everybody kind of gets delayed and rescheduled, and probably wouldn't look good.
Ping it off the chair.
Maybe that's it.
Well, and then we could also have a situation where if you have the combined DRAC PC and the DRAC brings up enough design issues, that it would still end up being referred back to a full DRB, potentially.
Yeah, well, that almost is the case sometimes anyway, when the Planning Commission hears a project, and then feels like there's more design issues that need to be worked out, so they will refer it back to DRB. They will go through and approve the basic concept with a lot of the details to come back to the DRB.
It just seems that there's moments where this is supposed to be streamlined and making things go faster, that's
Right.
not the result we're going to get.
I think Paul has his hand up.
Yeah, I want to chime in here, Chair Paul. One
Well, I have to
thing,
recognize you first, Paul.
okay, you recognize me.
Yes,
Okay.
I can see you.
One thing that I think needs to be mentioned is the fact that when an application is filed, Once it's filed, we send a referral of that application out to various departments. We typically send the plans to the neighborhood association. That would be the time in which we send the plans to the DRAC if it's a project that meets within the criteria for that lower level review.
That
It
would be
would be
perfect.
during that process that the DRAC would say to us, by the way, you know what, we don't feel comfortable, or I don't feel comfortable reviewing this as a 2-member DRAC. I would prefer that it would go up to the DRB. That is a good touch point before any noticing goes out.
Right. That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay, the same goes for neighborhood association. For example, if we send a notice out of the application referral, which we typically do to the neighborhood association, if we get a lot of comments back, a lot of concerns, that might be the cause to bump it up to the full DRB. So there are touch points early in the process
Good.
for the DRAC, for the staff, and for the public before the noticing occurs. So I
Good.
just wanted that.
Oh, that's the question I had, is that if there was that way to make sure that there was no egg on anybody's face when
Right.
the thing gets scheduled and then has to be rescheduled, because that's going to cause a lot of delays and it's got a lot of consternation among everybody. So why was it scheduled when it had to be referred back to DRB?
Right. And could I comment on a couple of other comments that came up?
Sure, go right ahead.
Was Ally explained that you guys had suggested a 3-member board. We went back to the city attorney and we consulted with the city attorney regarding quorum issues and the Brown Act. And what was concluded is that a 3-member board is really no different than a 5-member board. So we weren't gaining anything there. That's why we decided to step back to the 2 membership. And the other thing is that there are a couple of other things in the report, maybe we didn't explain quite well, but there are other things outside the DRAC that we are going to proceed with. One is we are going to look at combining a full DRB with the Planning Commission on large projects where we have conceptual review. I know that was a comment that came up and it seemed to be a comment of confusion during the public comment period tonight. So that's separate from the DRAC process, but that's certainly something that we are going to consider, because we've done that before where we've had joint Planning Commission and full DRB meetings vetting a specific project or a topic. So I just wanted to chime in there. Sorry to interrupt, but my
No, I
comments.
think that's good. I'm glad you clarified that too. Thanks, Paul.
Okay.
Are there any other comments from I guess we kind of went from the questions to the staff to actual comment on some things, but are there any other questions of staff first before we finish that?
I have just a couple.
Yeah, Stuart.
With respect to the DRAC/combo planning commission meetings, I mean, I expect this probably won't happen all that often, but I don't know. Planning commission takes up a lot of other issues. You know, I guess this is just a suggestion to staff for the sanity of your design review board. If we're going to have these joint meetings, if you could front load the combo items towards the front end of the meeting, so you don't have design review board members hanging around for 5 items that maybe have nothing to do with their participation. So that, I guess, would be a suggestion if we're going to do this. And are we in comments or questions, Larry? I don't even know where we are right now.
I think we sort of, we were trying to wrap up questions, but I think we're into comments anyway. So why don't we go on and let the
I have
full
one more
board.
quick question.
Oh, okay, Kent, Jess.
Sorry. We haven't talked at all about rotating members through it or the length of, service for a pair. And I don't know, I sort of have some ideas on that, but hasn't been discussed at all. Does anybody have opinions on that?
What did the staff what was the staff proposing?
So the staff proposal is that it would be what the membership of the DRAC would be a 1-year term. And the reason the proposal was this format in this way was because we heard from the last meeting that there was a concern about having different board members rotate and not really seeing the full length of a process. And so there was some concern about that. So that's the way we structured it. And so then, after that 1 year period, then there would be a new membership. But, open to other ideas as well, if your board is interested in seeing something different.
Okay. Are there any other questions of staff before we go into the comments? Hearing none, then let's have the board comment on what we've heard from both staff and public. Who wants to start? Stuart, you were asking about commenting, so are you ready to comment?
Sure. I was afraid you'd pick me first. That's the benefit of being the chair. You get to like just pick someone else.
Somebody on a hot seat, right?
Exactly. Well, I think, that suggestion I just made, just for the sanity of your design review board members, because I know the planning commission does a lot of other heavy lifting. So if those joint items come up, I would suggest we attempt as the best we can to keep those towards the front of the agenda. That's just self-serving, but there's no reason to keep people hanging around for hours. I'm a little, I can hear the public speaking and I can hear myself speaking in terms of reducing this down to 2 members. I would feel a lot more comfortable personally, because I know we kicked around 2 or 3 and now we're seeing this in its proposed form here. I sure would feel a lot better if it was 3. I know, is there a difference between 3 and 5? Well, yeah, there's 2 people that, that aren't there. But, I always value the opinion of another architect. And I very often in our meetings heard things that made me think from another point of view. So I'm a little uncomfortable with going down to 2. And I'm saying that as a member of the DRB subcommittee that Jeff and I have been pretty much manning for the last 6 months. And there's been a few times where, Jeff and I have kind of even commented in the middle of those meetings. It's like, boy, we sure would have liked some more input. So can that get vetted out ahead of time by pinging the chair on what projects are and aren't appropriate for the DRAC versus a full DRB versus trying to draw a line in the sand? So there's this discretion that is still here. And I guess we trust staff to bring it and the chair to determine if something needs 2 of us or 5 of us. And I guess that's where my discomfort still lies. And I think that there's probably some discomfort from the public in terms of where do we draw the line of the DRAC and a full board. And when can the DRAC say, hey, look, this is really more, whether it's a single family house that's controversial or 20 units or 10 units or whatever it is, when does the DRAC get to say, hey, staff, we're a lot more comfortable if this goes up to a full board. So I guess I'm still struggling with the discretion on where that call gets made. That's, and I don't know the answer. That's the problem with this whole process. I really don't know the answer, but it's a concern. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Stuart. Sarah.
So I mean, I really agree with Stuart as we were talking about, the kind of the clarity of the process about how projects get to the DRAC versus DRB. I think, part of the advantage of a streamlined process is that I would think from the, applicant standpoint is that they know what they can expect if they fall within these rules. And that discretion as to where it goes up to the DRB versus does not is something that, seems difficult to, you want there to be some flexibility, but the amount of flexibility that puts on the team, the DRAC members to elevate it or not seems, it does make me a little bit uncomfortable as well. I think I really do, I like the idea of having the process be more streamlined to support, getting projects through faster, but I don't think that should be at the sacrifice for quality in projects, at any scale. So I think it's trying to maintain that balance, and that discretionary piece of it still seems a little bit undefined in a way that puts pressure on the DRAC members that I'm not sure is pressure, but that discretion, that is undefined is kind of the key standpoint, or the key point that makes me uncomfortable. And then I think the idea about the 10 units, to me, that's a pretty large multifamily project for the majority of, San Rafael. I think in different areas, maybe downtown, it would not be, but again, that goes to that discretionary point about how projects get elevated up to the full DRB. So I think that's something that maybe needs further consideration. And I totally get the 5 to 2 to make it different, but 2 people's opinions is, not a lot. So I think that hearing Stuart's comments about how that's been, a challenge in process also leaves me wondering about the effectiveness of, trying to vet the quality of design with a streamlined process. So I don't think I have the answers, but those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Sarah. How about you, Jeff? Jeff, can you hear us?
I'm working. Yeah, there we
Okay.
go.
Okay.
I'm back. Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything I've heard. I mean, just kind of a general comment that, we're trying to streamline the process, but, the decisions we're making can impact, what people are going to see for several generations. So I'm a little perplexed on why we have to make it as quick as possible because, I like to slow down and get these things right. Another comment on the combined DRB PC for conceptual reviews for large projects. I think Larry's probably the only one that's there now that was involved with the one at Loch Lomond. And I personally felt that was, and we had joint meetings with the Planning Commission, and I thought those were highly effective. So I would definitely support those types of meetings. As far as only 2 on the DRAC, I've been on the subcommittee even longer now than Stuart, and I can tell you that it's a lot of work for 2 people, or should be. There's hundreds of pieces of information and a drawing set, and to go through those and to make I make myself crazy trying to make sure that I'm not missing anything. So I certainly think the more sets of eyes to see a set of drawings, the better. So I think 3 would be better. And those are my comments.
Okay. My comments are, I would agree with what most everyone has said. I think I hope this doesn't sound wrong. I'm not intending it to be that, but I think that if we're talking about elevating or trying to streamline these processes and having a combined joint meeting with the Planning Commission, most of these issues that are going to come up, I think, are architectural. And unfortunately, I think, the landscape component of most of these projects is minor compared to the architectural component. When you're building a project of this size, it's going to be there at least 50, maybe 100 years, and it's got to be right, I think. The landscaping, it's something that can be redone a little more easily. So what I'm getting at is, if we have one landscape architect and one architect as the only advisors to the Planning Commission, it puts a lot of power in the architect that's on the Planning Commission or on the DRAC, that if they have a certain outlook towards design or project development or whatever, it could skew a lot of projects for that year. Now, I know this is only a pilot project, but I think it would be helpful to have at least 2 architects on the project to look at the project design, so that if they both agree, it gives me more confidence that it's a good design. If there is some difference or controversy between the 2 architects as to the overall design or the massing or the grouping or whatever, the site planning, that would tell me something. And I think that that's important for the planning commission to know, because then ultimately, if the planning commission gets a kind of a mixed message from the advisory board, they may in fact send it back to the full DRB for a more thorough vetting of the project. So I don't feel real comfortable with just two people here advising the planning commission. So those are my comments. I think that wraps up the board's comments. We're not going to take any action on this, so.
Just one
the chair.
quick note. I mean,
Yeah.
I suppose at the end of the day, the public always has the tool of appealing a project. I mean, right? If we have a DRAC decision they don't like, or DRAC to ZA, the public needs to know it's generally a simple matter for a member of the public to actually appeal a project to either the PC or wherever. No one wants that. I'm not condoning it. I'm just saying, hopefully if someone saw that coming, staff would pull the ripcord back and go to a higher body to begin with. But the public should know there is a process of appealing. And of course, again, nobody wants that, but it's there.
Well, the DRC doesn't have any decision-making power anyway, right?
Exactly.
It's just, they're advising the planning commission. The planning commission is going to make a decision, and if the public doesn't like it, that's when they appeal the planning commission decision. Is that correct, Ally?
That's correct. It would be the planning commission's decision that would be
Right.
appealable. And the
So
planning
that would bounce
commission,
up to city council?
correct.
And Larry, given your years and years of service on the commission, you have the most unique view of all of us on this board right now, of having sat in both chairs. So, you should, I would hope, have, whatever you have to say means a lot on this, in this process.
Thank you.
Through the chair, Ally, did you get all the information you were looking for, or is there anything that's missing? Okay.
Yes, I did. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate all your input. It's actually very useful information. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ally, for all your hard work. We'll now move on to the second public hearing agenda for tonight. That's agenda item number 3. It's the public hearing on the draft downtown San Rafael precise plan. There's a staff report, and is that from Steve or is that from Barry Miller?
So, Chair Paul, I'd like to introduce Stefan Pellegrini. He is from Opticos. He helped us prepare the very thorough document that is the precise plan, along with the form-based code. So he has been providing our presentations to the Planning Commission, and I'm happy to welcome him.
Good. Stefan, you're on.
Thank you, Ally. And good evening, Vice Chair Paul and members of the DRB and members of the community. I have a short presentation to share with you that provides an overview of the downtown precise plan, and I'll spend a little bit of time on that. And then Paul and Ally asked us to pay particular attention to the regulatory framework for the precise plan, which is found in Chapter 9. That is the development standards, the form-based code for the downtown planning area. So I'll spend a little bit of time on that. And I look forward to comments and questions on this topic. So I'm going to share my screen, and just one moment, I'll bring that up. And hopefully all of you can see that.
Yep.
Great. So I'm going to give you sort of a real brief introduction to the process and the progress that's occurred to date. I'll talk a little bit about the precise plan and then go through the individual chapters of the precise plan. So we actually started this project in January of 2019. We worked in parallel with the San Rafael General Plan and the oversight of the General Plan Steering Committee. That actually occurred with several downtown specific meetings for the General Plan Steering Committee starting in the spring of 2019. Many of you may remember that we conducted a multi-day design charrette in a pop-up space on 4th Street in downtown San Rafael in May. We continued through a process to sorry, I have a couple of people who are joining me here. We continued that process through the summer, talking about sort of downtown options, and then continued to draft plan in the fall. And the public review draft was released in December of 2020. So the precise plan and code provides design principles for defining a community vision. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to turn off my camera just 1 second, please.
Are you still with us, Stefan?
Stefan?
My apologies. I'm really sorry about that. So yeah, so I'll continue. So the precise plan provides principles, guiding policies, strategies in the forms of recommendations and implementing actions. And then it also provides regulatory standards in Chapter 9, which I'll talk a little bit about this evening separately. As I go through the slides, you'll see there's a yellow sticky in the upper right-hand corner. That's referring to a particular subsection of the plan to allow you to follow along for reference. These are many of the key themes that the plan discusses. And I just want to say here that these really emerged through discussion, prioritization, and iterative feedback with the General Plan Steering Committee, but also members of the public that were engaged, particularly during the charrette, but throughout the process. So the specific plan has 10 chapters, and I'll be talking a little bit about each one of those briefly. So I'll start with chapters 1 through 3, which provide an introduction to the plan, a little bit of information about existence, and being design principles and policies. Section 1 provides a summary of the process, including the community outreach process. You can find information there on the community engagement, in particular, the community design charrette that was held in the spring of 2019. All in all, we engaged with over 100 people during the design charrettes and amassed over 280 public comments. These 8 design principles emerged from the charrette process. These are listed in section 3.1 of the plan. These provide guidance to strengthen downtown sense of identity. They discuss placemaking, preservation, but also provide direction for how downtown can grow and be more supportive of infill development. The guiding policies and expected outcomes section in chapter 3 also provides guidance for specific policies, as well as the results of those policies if those policies are implemented. And then chapter 4 actually articulates a design vision. This actually is described for the downtown planning area as a whole, as well as for specific sub areas. And it also puts forward an expected program for the downtown precise plan area, which of course became part of what was analyzed in the general plan EIR. So you can see here that the plan anticipates approximately 2,200 units of new residential development by 2040, and about 2,000 jobs, or just under 700,000 square feet of non-residential space. And you can see how the plan anticipates the breakdown of that program here between the 4 sub areas that I'll talk about. The design vision also discusses and contemplates a wide variety of public improvements that could be made in support of this downtown program. Section 4.1 articulates this information as an illustrative vision. It describes the areas within the downtown area that are anticipated for new development, thinking about opportunity sites, places where development is likely or could potentially occur through either the intensification of existing parcels or the consolidation of properties or the construction of new buildings on vacant or underutilized sites. But it allows and anticipates that that development will be happening in a flexible framework that is dependent upon private investment. And that really is where the development standards in Chapter 9 come into play in terms of regulating the anticipating form and character of new development in particular areas. Chapter 9 is actually guided by a sort of detailed zoning map for the downtown area, which is referred to in the plan as the regulating plan. And this sets forth standards for intensity here, first and foremost, measured by the height of buildings. But I'll talk a little bit more about the other standards that are guiding anticipated development in the downtown area. And they are organized to articulate sort of the vision that emerged from the downtown planning process. And so I mentioned that key to this is this idea of heights. The plan and the regulatory framework also anticipate and try to build in the potential for height bonuses within existing zones. This is carrying forward the existing traditions that San Rafael has to allow height bonuses, either for the provision of affordable housing in many areas in the downtown area, and or additional community benefits like civic and open space, for example. So this is now institutionalized into the regulatory framework. The code, first and foremost, is designed to accommodate the density bonus that could be obtained up to 35% through state density bonus law. And the form of buildings that are articulated in Chapter 9 anticipate that potential bonus in terms of the amount of additional floor area and height that could be granted to to particular projects. It also anticipates that certain areas, particularly those within vicinity of the transit center, could be afforded larger height increases through recent adopted state laws that are supportive, particularly for 100% affordable projects. So we're really trying to sort of increase the amount of predictability that can be expected in various areas of the downtown planning area. And I mentioned briefly previously that there's a public framework that is seen as sort of going along in support of this private development. This is articulated in section 4.4. This includes guidance for new parks and civic spaces, improvements to streets and pedestrian passages, and also some discussion of natural systems that here are seen as potential ways that future issues with regards to sea level rise and flooding in the downtown area can be mitigated. I mentioned before, the downtown vision is described by these 4 sub areas. At the most intense, we start at the downtown gateway in adjacency to the transit center. Excuse me, and then the plan also provides guidance for the downtown core, the West End Village, and the Montecito commercial area east of the 101 freeway. There's an individual chapter on historic resources. We've had an opportunity to have a lot of discussion on this topic to date, both with the community as well as the recent hearings with the Planning Commission. The plan was able to accommodate an updated survey and inventory of historic resources in the downtown area, and that is provided as an appendix to the plan. The updated survey, it looked at 572 properties, identified 90 potential new resources, and 2 areas that could potentially be eligible as historic districts. And Chapter 5 articulates those findings and provides recommendations for improvements to the Historic Preservation Ordinance, as well as other implementation guidance. And the recommendations for context-sensitive development within the historic context of the downtown have been carried forward into that Chapter 9 regulatory framework. So this map, which you can find in section 5.3, articulates that update to historic resources. You can see the areas in the darker red and pink colors that have been identified, those 92 buildings as potentially eligible as an individual resource or a contributing resource. The 2 dark outlines represent 2 areas that could potentially be eligible as historic districts. And you can see these in the context to the existing landmarks and districts that were determined in the previous, now over 40-year-old survey. We've had a lot of comments on this to date and are working to finalize the content of the inventory based on further public review and comment. Chapter 6 provides guidance for transportation and parking. This provides guidance to establish a hierarchy of streets within the downtown area that focus different priorities and different modes in different geographic areas. It also provides guidance for transportation improvements and improvements to parking, many of which seek to implement the previous downtown parking and wayfinding study that outlined a whole variety of recommendations that this plan recognizes and tries to bring forward. That layered network is summarized here. There are certain streets provide guidance for pedestrian priority, others for bicycle priority, with particular attention to move east, west, and north, south across the plan area and fill the gaps within the downtown area that the citywide bicycle and pedestrian plan had an opportunity to accommodate, as well as providing guidance for the vehicular priority streets and transit priority streets. There are some key things, including recommendations to make certain north-south streets, which are currently one-way today, to reconfigure those as two-way streets, as well as make improvements to particular streets for bicycle and pedestrian activity. With discussions with the Planning Commission and in some of the comment letters that you have had an opportunity to receive, a lot of discussion about potential pedestrian improvements to 4th Street and the accommodation of a real pedestrian environment along the 4th Street corridor. Chapter 7 provides a discussion and policy recommendations with regards to affordable housing and anti-displacement. This includes a discussion both of work that's been done to date, as well as recommendations moving forward, many of which are again reflected in the implementation framework for the plan and the regulatory framework of Chapter 9. And then to sort of close out the front end chapters, we have an implementation strategy. This actually sort of provides a roadmap and prioritizes different implementing actions, provides a description, and actually then ties them to potential funding sources that might be utilized to implement these individual components of the project. Section 8 also provides a specific economic development strategy which provides guidance for business growth and development, as well as the support of new infill in the downtown, as well as specific actions with regards to historic resources, affordable housing and anti-displacement, new utility infrastructure, and infrastructure and adaptation that will be necessary in the coming years due to the impacts of climate change. So I'm going to close out by talking a little bit about Chapter 9 and the regulatory framework in the form-based code. This chapter is actually summarized in 4 articles, and I'll go through each of these tonight. Article 1 provides an introduction. The key set of development standards for the downtown zone districts are presented in Article 2. Article 3 provides information that is supplemental to those downtown zoning standards, specifically speaking of supplemental standards for sites, architecture, and frontage. And then Article 4 provides definitions and methods of measurements, particularly for items that are included in the code that are not currently reflected in the city's municipal code. So you can see in Article 1, there's a quick code guide. This actually provides a graphic flow chart of how Chapter 9 is intended to be used, starting with the finding your zone, your parcel, and the zone district that applies to your parcel, understanding allowed uses, and then moving through to develop to understand your zoning envelope, the supplemental standards that are subject to that zoning envelope, moving through to recommendations on review procedures that are described in Division 1.1. So we start with the preamble. This provides a discussion of the foundation of the code. The code actually establishes 4 zone districts that are utilized, what is referred to as the urban to rural transect to organize them. They are organized on a spectrum of intensity from most intense to least intense, really following the guidance that is outlined in Chapter 4 that articulates where intense development and less intense development is expected to occur in the downtown area. And the regulating plan, again, sort of provides a detailed zoning map for the downtown area. It reflects this areas of intensity, again, emanating out from the transit area and the greater intensities in the vicinity of the transit center and the eastern portions of downtown. It provides special consideration for the downtown core, as well as the West End district, and guidance for the Montecito area east of 101. You can see there are multiple tiers of heights that are seen here. The first number refers to a base height. The second number refers to a height that could be possible through the granting of one or more bonuses. And these are, again, are tied to affordable housing or the provision of other potential amenities. These carry forward in many ways the heights that were existing in the previous downtown planning framework, but we sought to improve them both to try to understand, to improve the potential for development to occur, but also to help modulate the heights a little bit more carefully as they relate to transitions in the downtown planning area between areas of distinct physical form. Just want to note a couple things here. You also see that the Latham Street neighborhood is generally excluded from the downtown regulating plan. This actually is seen as maintaining the existing MR 2.5 designation. And I also sort of want to demonstrate here that there is an open subzone that is described by the hatched zones. And those are generally areas where the same number of standards apply in terms of what guides the form and character of buildings, but there is a more relaxed or open approach to allowed land uses in that zone. And you can see that reflected in one of my upcoming slides. The downtown zones are described in Article 2. What this slide shows is the qualitative intent of the zone districts, starting with descriptive intent, and a summary of their desired form for each zone. And then the zone pages are actually present standards in a series of 6 pages that are function as a set of 3 spreads. And these provide guidance for how buildings can be placed on the parcel, how encroachments actually occur, guidance for the height of buildings, and step backs that actually are required at upper floors in many cases. And then it provides specific guidance on frontages, how those buildings actually are relating to the public realm, to the back of the sidewalk, and then specific guidance that actually might have to do with the particular geography. So here on the left hand, you can see additional guidance for adjacencies when you have larger, more intense zone districts that are backing onto residential or less intense zone districts. There are additional supplemental standards for how that transition should be occurring, with additional step backs and reductions in height to that transition. There's guidance for parking, both how much parking is allowed or expected, as well as where that parking can be placed on the parcel. After that section, there's guidance with regards to the use tables. You can see here how those are laid out ranging from uses that are permitted by right in each zone district to uses that are expecting an administrative level of review or a conditional use permit and discretionary review. You can also see that the open zone is reflected here, and you can see sort of the relationship between the regular zone and the open zone, where uses with somewhat greater flexibility are generally allowed. The supplemental standards found in Article 3 include specific guidance for site planning with regards to topics such as parking and loading, landscaping, etc. Division 3.2 also provides guidance for massing and articulation. This is a sort of style silent guidance, in that we are providing guidance for many of the components that were reflected in the Good Design Guidelines for Downtown document and process. This chapter speaks to general facade composition, to special elements such as bay windows, corner elements, towers, and etc. But it is designed to accommodate sort of a wide variety of architectural expressions that can sort of fit within that framework, which is trying to guide projects towards a sort of context-sensitive development approach that's respectful to the existing content of the downtown building stock. Division 3.2 also provides specific guidance for projects that are adjacent to historic resources. And so this goes back to the guidance in Chapter 5, either buildings that are historic resources outright, or adjacent to historic resources, or exist within one of those 2 areas that would be eligible as historic districts. This section actually provides additional guidance to ensure that new buildings are compatible with the context that those historic resources are expected to maintain. We do anticipate that the code will continue to allow the adaptation and of historic resources in the downtown area. And the plan seeks to sort of provide guidance for how that can occur, as well as the recommendations for how those kinds of projects and when those projects need to be reviewed for their historical quality. Division 3.3 also provides guidance for frontage. I mentioned that this is private frontage, how buildings basically meet the street in any given zone district. There is a variety of options that can be utilized, and multiple frontages can occur within one building. And then Division 4, which I mentioned, provides definitions for use types, items that are not found in the municipal code, as well as methods of measurement that are unique to this code and differentiate from the municipal code. So we had an opportunity to sort of test the standards. Staff asked us to test the code standards looking at a whole series of existing downtown development applications. We were able to look at these and understand where the development code was going to sort of require changes or improvements to what had been reviewed and processed previously, as well as where the code could be refined to make sure that it was going to accommodate and be compatible with sort of expectations around development. And so this process was sort of a really effective learning process for the team and for staff. And we have seen some refinements come out of the code through this process. So that concludes my presentation. I appreciate this opportunity to introduce the Downtown Precise Plan and Code to you and look forward to any questions and discussion on the topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. Does the board have any questions at this point?
I do.
Stuart, go ahead.
So a couple of things, like to Stefan and the staff, what are we looking at here? I see we're looking at a downtown precise plan, and I know that we've discussed a form-based code as part of this. Is this like an all-in-one thing that, you know, I'm trying to assess in my head. This is the first touch we've really had with this. What are we commenting on here tonight, or what is the progression of this thing as it moves through the different levels of our staffs and our commissions and council? Can maybe Alicia or whoever can explain to me the process here? I can't hear you. Oh, hold on. I can't hear him. Can anybody?
Here.
I don't have Barry. No audio.
Yes. Stuart, you don't have any audio?
Not on Barry.
Oh, no, well, I don't either. Barry, have you unmuted yourself?
He's trying to talk, but we got no sound.
Steve, can you
He
help?
can do sign language.
How
It's weird.
about Stefan? Can he respond?
Stefan, you want to provide some brief summary?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, can I
I'd be
interrupt?
happy.
Steve, can you make him a co-host? That might help. So Barry can talk.
Steve, are you there? Doesn't sound like Steve's there.
Or Ali.
Yeah,
Ali, you have the ability to do that as well.
I'm here, guys.
Can you help us out with Barry's speaker?
He might have a microphone problem.
Yeah.
I think I did the opposite.
Barry, did you test your microphone first?
Barry is gone.
Yeah, he dropped.
Gone. Yeah. He must have some
There he
connectivity.
is.
Oh,
He's
there you
back.
are. Barry,
Right,
did
now
you test your
unmute
microphone?
him. Still nothing. He can call in with a phone for the audio.
Yeah. Barry, did you hear that? While we're waiting for Barry, Stefan, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, I'd be happy to sort of chime in while we're waiting for Barry. So the precise plan is both a policy document and a regulatory document. And on the policy side, the precise plan is really functioning like a area plan for the general plan. It's providing sort of a detailed policy roadmap for new development, public and private improvements through 2040 within the downtown planning area. And then Chapter 9 is basically a regulatory framework. It is a zoning document that is designed to implement that policy direction. And it is intended that those zoning regulations in Chapter 9, once they are adopted, will replace the existing regulatory framework of the downtown zones, and that future applications in the downtown would just look to Chapter 9 to understand what they can do and where within the downtown planning area. So that sort of encapsulates that. The EIR that has been drafted for the citywide general plan pays particular attention to the downtown plan area. And so that EIR basically is functioning as an environmental document for both plans, both the general plan and the precise plan. So we, just went through the 3 hearings with the Planning Commission, and we anticipate continuing the process of discussing and reviewing the precise plan with the City Council.
Okay, thanks, Stefan. Do we have Barry yet?
Well, okay, then I have some further questions.
Okay, go ahead.
I thought I might have seen some discrepancies on some of those PowerPoint pages and maps. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. So I'm kind of concentrating mostly on the West End Village end of the thing. I know we want to, you said in your verbiage that the idea is to take the higher density areas, maybe closer to the east side near the freeway, and step down in a transitional way, which makes sense, especially as we head west, where we have lower buildings and more homes and things like that. But then something caught my eye on things like at the most western part of your maps in like the old Yardbird site where Best Buy is right now. I know it's a large site, used to be a grocery store. It seemed to me from what I was seeing that there's opportunities there for a 40-foot high building with a 20-foot potential bonus. So, a very dense, tall buildings on the westernmost side of that. Am I mistaken by seeing that or not?
Yeah, I believe you're referring to the area that's bordered by 4th Street, and I guess that's Ida on the east side, and
Exactly.
2nd Street to the south. And that is sort of a T4 zone, so that anticipates flexible frontage and sort of character and form that's similar to the other portions of the West End. But yes, that particular set of parcels has a 40-foot base height, which would generally translate to 3-story buildings in that location.
Plus a 20-foot potential bonus.
That's correct, yeah. And so the bonus here,
just as a comment, I mean, we're going to get to comments soon, but I can tell you that seems completely counterintuitive to what was been presented to us in terms of stepping things down as we head west, and all of a sudden having 50-foot potential buildings down near the West End. I'll get to that in comments as you can get my flavor here. But I feel that if you've confirmed that that's what I witnessed there. So I guess we'll get to comments on what I feel about that later. But you've confirmed that that's what I just saw.
Do you have any other questions?
Can I add something to Stefan's response? And that is that what the precise plan attempts to do is it's recognizing that we have this affordable housing requirement, and the affordable housing requirement sometimes leads applications to take advantage of density bonus regulations, density bonus law, density bonuses and concessions. And those concessions and those density bonuses could lead to a larger height. And what this plan does, what Stefan's plan does, is it's trying to hone in that height. And we're evaluating right now. We're kind of staff is actually evaluating how to bring in our density bonus regulations with what's happening in the downtown precise plan. But the goal with this plan is to kind of try to create something that you can understand, you know what that height limit will be if you comply with these standards.
Yeah, but we're talking about zoning changes that might be coming down the road, like you said. So if it wasn't zoned that way in the first place and that opportunity wasn't there, so I mean, this is a significant thing we're discussing. If we change the zoning to allow for base heights of a certain height, and then then perhaps we need to take a step back and look at some of these areas a little more carefully as a community. And I appreciate Stefan's efforts. That was a spectacular presentation. I grew up in this town. I grew up in the West End. I've been here all 53 years of my life, and I still live here. So I am a little passionate about this part of town.
Yeah.
My office is here as well. So, I mean, I'm going to fight for what I believe in this area. So, and if we change the zoning, it's gonna come. So that's, it isn't just like, let's check a box so we can meet a state number and show them that we've identified a site or whatnot. This is real stuff.
And Stefan, can you clarify, Chair Paul, is it okay if I kind of wanted to make sure I clarify?
I think we're trying to answer these questions.
Okay, so the base height is the height that we've seen there, that's allowable now, correct?
The existing base height is actually 36 feet for that particular set of parcels. And through the zoning process, we made the decision to adjust that to 40 in order to ensure, in part, a good ground floor in new construction for mixed use purposes. And so that the 40-foot sort of maximum height is seen as a way that we can accommodate a 3-story building with both a tall ground floor and the other things that happen at the top of the building, a parapet, a roof, other things, which can fall sort of under that window. And then there was sort of, I think, and then staff, maybe Ali, you might sort of also want to sort of speak to this in particular, because I think there was absolutely a discussion about what could be done to understand that parcel, because it's larger, it has some other constraints due to sort of the existing development pattern, that how that could sort of be thought of as an opportunity site and how new development could actually be encouraged there. So there was this discussion about differentiating that site in particular and giving the potential to do 2 floors of bonus as opposed to what you see in other parts of the West End, which is geared towards 1 story of bonus. But there have been some other public comments on that site and on that decision in particular, but the existing height there is 36, and the code seeks to recalibrate that actually to 40.
With all of the same allowed uses with the West, I don't have the zoning code sitting in front of me, but is it is in that zoning that's at that retail site there? Is it actually support mixed use or housing? What's that zoning support? The WE.
Yeah, I can. It's at the T4 MSO. I actually don't remember that off the top of my head, but I can.
Well, I'm talking about our current zoning.
Yeah.
Alicia might be able to speak to it. What does WEV allow?
Yeah, so the zoning designation, so the T, is it neighborhood or is it Main Street? Whatever the zoning designation change was intended to, it was intended to align whatever that, the uses that are permitted in that district. So
current,
the same uses that are allowed there now were brought forward into this form-based code. That said, the Planning Commission has seen a version of this and they have asked us to rethink. They feel like there's an opportunity to rethink, and I'm not necessarily in this particular location, but just like looking at our zoning now and looking at where there might be opportunities to either add or take away just based on the surrounding uses. So, but as of now, the land use categories that are allowed in the existing code were transported into this.
And then are items like our parking standards being revisited as part of all of this as well?
Yes. Stefan, do you have a second to go over that?
I do, yeah. So, the parking and wayfinding study had made some sort of longstanding recommendations about reductions in non-residential parking requirements and also to expand the geographic boundaries of the downtown parking district. And many of those are sort of brought forward. There also is a general reduction in parking minimums across the zone districts for both for residential uses in addition to non-residential uses. And so those are calibrated again in terms of their proximity to transit. What you see in the most intense zones is the lowest parking minimums. And that sort of emanates out as you sort of move outward from the downtown core.
Are there any other questions of staff?
Oh,
Yeah,
could
I
I
got one.
make comments, Vice Chair
Sure.
Paul? Just getting back to Board Member Summers. West End Village zoning right now has a 36-foot height limit. There is a 6-foot height bonus under the current general plan, and it allows mixed use. As Ali mentioned, that's being carried over. What's being changed are the heights for that area. And I just want to make it very clear that for the most part, along the West End Village area, not much is changing with the exception of this property, which is the West End corner or the bookend to the West End area, because it's a whole collective of parcels, and also the property at the corner of 4th and E Street. And I do want to mention that on those two properties, or those two bookends, it was purposely identified with a higher building allowance than everything else in between, primarily because they were the bookends to West End Village. And that came out of a discussion with the General Plan Steering Committee and a subgroup of the General Plan Steering Committee. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the parking standards for West End Village are higher than the rest of downtown, even in the current proposal for the precise plan, recognizing that obviously it doesn't benefit by a parking district right now, and the parking challenges are much greater than the rest of downtown. So I did want to mention those points.
And this is
Perhaps,
Barry. If you can hear me, I am on the line now, and just wanted to chime in and reiterate what Paul said. There was a lot of discussion about this site that we're talking about now at the West End Gateway, and part of the reason that the height bonus, Barry Miller, the General Plan Project Manager.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the point I was going to make is that there was a lot of discussion about looking for incentives for lot consolidation, which was part of the reason that a higher height bonus was used on that site as a way to encourage the consolidation of a lot of small parcels in that area. And also that was a gateway site. And I kind of want to come back to something Paul said about the steering committee. So there were a large number of meetings at General Plan Steering Committee on this, and then a subcommittee of the General Plan Steering Committee convened last summer and met 6 times. And again, a lot of discussion about this one site that we're talking about now, and the way that site served as a gateway into the downtown area. That's just part of the context on that. Thanks.
Okay,
I had a question.
go ahead, Jeff.
So it appears that there's a goal of, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but like 2,200 housing units and a couple thousand jobs for the downtown area. So is there computer modeling that you use to kind of predict then the amount of square footage you have to add and ultimately the height of buildings to achieve that goal?
Yeah, so it's a little bit. Go ahead, Stefan.
Oh, I'm sorry, Barry. I was just going to say the way that we sort of approach that is we looked at the sites within the downtown that had some likelihood of redevelopment or the accommodation of new development. And we looked at all of those, understanding that it's, it is an unlikely scenario that you'll be able to push development on all of those parcels. We can say with sort of certainty that the program was sort of came out of a process of looking at all of those parcels, understanding what really is sort of potentially developable or redevelopable in the next 20 years, and understanding the program that would occur in the envelope that you see reflected in the zoning standards. So it's sort of a projection of likely development. There is a potential within the downtown for much more to occur, but it also is the basis for what the general plan is analyzing. And so if there was, in the event that in the next 20 years there was more development that could figure out how to be accommodated in the downtown, it would be beyond the thresholds of which the EIR has actually anticipated at this time, and would actually require some additional environmental analysis around that topic. But it's seen as sort of a practical potential of what actually can occur.
So to a certain extent, the development will happen organically as sites become available.
That's correct, yes, because the plan is going to rely on private investment and private development for that to occur. And that's going to be subject to the ups and downs of the economy and other factors that really that the city can't control.
The other question I had is other component of your project was to have pocket parks in some plaza areas in the downtown area. Obviously, those sites don't exist today. I'm just sort of curious how that would be achieved.
Yeah, thank you. So the plan actually establishes a development standard that projects need to set aside a portion or a percentage of square footage for essentially privately owned and maintained public space, and that the number of that requirement increases with the intensity of the proposal. And so with the idea that the largest projects that actually might be occurring in the downtown would actually create a requirement that public space or privately accessible public space, publicly accessible private space could emerge through those projects.
So as they go up, they could reduce their footprint and create these spaces, correct?
Yeah, and one thing to think about is that this is a development standard. It's not an option for projects. I'm looking at the T4 standards right now, for example, and again, as the projects get bigger, a very large project would actually have to set aside 5% of the site for this sort of civic and open space. But there is an additional tier there where civic space could be used as a tool for projects to achieve a bonus. And so there is other civic spaces or larger, more significant spaces that could emerge, particularly in situations where project might be asking for additional height within the allotted bonus height.
Okay, great, thanks. Those are my questions.
Any other questions from the board? I have a couple. One question, Stefan, was there a consideration of the transferred development rights?
I appreciate that question. There is a little bit of a discussion of that in the plan. The city has an existing TDR ordinance in the municipal code that is really intended to be utilized for in the preservation of historic properties and transferring development rights away in order to preserve historic properties. So the plan does contemplate that and discuss that. It is seen as sort of an exploratory implementation item, but there's not a hard sort of regulation or recommendation beyond what the municipal code provides today that is reflected in this plan.
Was there any consideration that transfer development rights to other properties and how they would affect the form-based code or the general plan?
I think absolutely that there was quite a bit of sort of discussion around that. I think one of the challenges that we sort of always have with TDRs is that, you know, we have to be able to give something to, if we're taking something away from one property, there needs to be an incentive for another property owner to actually take that. And that actually may mean that they need to have sort of the opportunity or the ability to increase their heights or increase their intensity in some areas beyond which is actually currently anticipated. And so I think that sort of there is sort of that interplay, I think, that makes it, will continue to make it difficult. If there's a one-story building in the downtown area that might have 5 floors of development that they can transfer to someone else might need to look at that and say, well, that's only going to be attractive to me if I can actually add that to my property and make a building that is that much bigger. And those situations in practice are very difficult to do when we're talking about the intensities that we see in a downtown of San Rafael's size. You know, as opposed to situations where projects can assemble air rights and do very, very, very large buildings. And so that interplay, I think, is going to continue to hash out, but it is absolutely an effective tool for preserving historic buildings. But there would need to be some additional exploration to understand how effective that tool could be in the context of downtown San Rafael.
Okay. It looked like the highest heights were reserved for the area around Heatherton, west of the freeway. And I guess,
yeah.
Is it anticipated that if that was all fully built out, that would create kind of a wall west of the freeway that would block views from the freeway? Was there any consideration of that?
We had a lot of discussion about that. You know, the previous station area plan actually increased the heights for a large portion of that area up to 66 feet. And so we took that sort of area as a basis, and we did expand it a little bit, in particular, so that the height transition would occur on the middle of blocks as opposed to across streets. That 66-foot height limit in the zoning today is reflected in what is a 70-foot base height for that area.
I noticed that.
My understanding is that when the station area zoning was done, there was that discussion about sort of creating a wall and what that would do to block views from the freeway or sort of establish a wall at the downtown. I think the reality there is that the development pattern there and the pattern of sort of sites that are already built out versus sites where there is potential is going to mean that that kind of height, we would see buildings of that height actually emerge on individual parcels, but it would be incredibly unlikely to see sort of a consistent build out of that height across that zone, just given the existing pattern of development that's sort of in that area. And I think we also sort of anticipate and we acknowledge that there are already proposals in that area that have used that 66-foot height, plus the provision of additional bonuses through the existing ordinance to achieve heights that are basically within this envelope that the downtown plan is generally providing for. And so it was not necessarily seen as sort of a drastic shift from what was happening already. It's just attempting to put it into a more predictable regulatory framework and pay more attention to the transitions of those buildings to their context than the existing zoning actually would allow.
Okay. You mentioned, I think one of the exhibits that you had showed some of this additional height being achieved by step backs in the design.
Yeah.
What was the purpose of those step backs? What benefit is that?
So that's a great question. So there's a few things. The first and foremost, it's really sort of an environmental one in terms of when you step back heights at the upper floors of buildings, you can actually and you can maintain a greater amount of sunlight onto the public spaces that those streets are going to front. And in the case of many of the east-west streets in downtown that have a strong orientation, we actually looked at those heights to make sure that the sidewalks, particularly on the north side of the street, would not sort of fall into shadow for large portions of the day, large months of the year. So the step back actually helps to maintain that solar angle to something that we sort of feel is beneficial for the downtown area. It also has the impact of when you're on the sidewalk as a pedestrian, the perception of the height of that building appears to be less tall than it really is, because the way that your sort of eye functions or sort of relates to the upper stories of the building changes because of that step back. That we've also, actually the last thing I sort of want to say is that the size of the upper floors seeks to sort of be calibrated to what we could achieve through a density bonus. Again, with the idea that if you have a 4-story building and you're able to go up 2 additional floors through a 35% bonus, that 35% bonus is generally going to equate to 2 additional floors, but 2 additional floors that are a much smaller floor area than the floors below. And so it allows, sort of anticipates again that that step back at the upper floors can accommodate the sort of zoning envelope that some of these affordable housing projects might be asking for.
Okay, and I think the last question I had, was there any consideration of, given a form-based code, figuring the maximum envelope that a property could sustain in terms of, gross square footage, and then allowing that to be shaped so that it's not necessarily covering 100% of the lots. They would cover 50% of the lots, but go up twice as high. And that allows for some public open space down at the ground level. That some cities have done that, so that you kind of, instead of getting an overall zone of 40-foot height buildings, you have the 40 foot, but it's the gross square footage that you can build on a lot, and it can be put into a different form that allows for more setbacks even at the ground level, or step backs, or a different placement on the site that makes a little more variety out of the urban environment. Had there been any discussion on that?
Yeah, Chair Paul, I think that actually is a great topic to bring up. I definitely sort of, in speaking with staff, there was a desire to create or go with a regulatory approach that would result in a predictable zoning envelope in order to not only communicate to the development community what kind of development sort of wants to be seen here, but also to ensure that the sort of future review and application process can be streamlined to the extent that it can be streamlined. And so we basically sort of went the route of saying, let's look at a zoning envelope that is predictable and provide guidance for setbacks, heights, step backs at upper floors, ways that the building needs to sort of shave away in addition as it transitions to lower intensity areas, particularly at the rear setback and how the rear setback sort of functions. But it basically is saying, let's put everybody into these predictable envelopes. It would always be possible for individual projects to go with a different approach, but they would be looking at a situation where they would need to be, in this framework, asking for relief from existing standards in order to do that. That sort of more sort of like 100% discretionary approach is essentially, yeah. And, sort of in order to do that, a lot of the things that you're describing, such as making the building taller and skinnier in order to sort of provide public open space, as I mentioned, there are already development standards in the framework that are geared to do that, and in order to sort of put those forward. So we try to sort of accommodate those to the maximum extent possible. But all in all, I think the essential philosophy is, let's go with a predictable zoning envelope so that we can be clear about what the city wants to see and what the city wants to review and how applicants should be responding, as opposed to something that might be subject to sort of future discretionary discussion or request of a variance, for example.
Well, you're saying that the city zoning code already has that possibility, but if that requires a variance, it's pretty hard to get a variance for height, isn't it?
Yeah, you know, I think variance is sort of not the right term. I mean, I think the applicant would really sort of need to ask for a zone change, because a variance is really only sort of presented when there is clearly a hardship. There's a reason why they actually can't comply with the standard.
Yeah.
And I think, and applicants always have the ability to say that. They can go in and say, well, the general plan says this, but I want to do this here, and I want to go through the process to change that. You know, and they can do that with their zoning. That's always going to be sort of possible, but they're going to need to go through that discretionary action to change that zoning to accommodate their project.
Well, the reason why I'm thinking in terms of what I was saying before, as far as the possibility, I know that it may not be likely, but the possibility that all those properties along Heatherton, west of the freeway, could be developed up to a very high height that would essentially create a wall that would prevent us from any view of the western part of our city. If those properties could have some flexibility so that you might develop view corridors through these properties, they would go taller but skinnier, and they would still have the same square footage. That would be a public benefit, I would think that would be the nexus for allowing that without, you know, showing a hardship, but saying we're doing this for a public benefit, whether it's the you know the open space at the ground floor or the view corridors from the freeway or a combination of the two. So I was just wondering if they'd consider that. Okay. I think you've answered the question though.
Thank you.
So thank you. Is there any other questions for the staff? No, I don't hear any, so let's open up.
Wait, hold on, sorry.
Oh, no,
I was waving my
Stuart?
hand. Just real quick. I think Jeff has the same question, because what's the role? I mean, this is aiming towards a form-based code. What's the role of the design review board and the planning commission and the council when one of these things comes forward? If someone checks all the boxes, do they just go apply for a building permit? So I'm a little curious what the procedure is for the applicant if they are working with this code.
So, Stefan, I don't know if you have that table, but there is a process table that's similar to, that basically brings in, you know, the types of projects that are subject to review currently, similar to what we have in our zoning code. So there is a stepped approach similar to that, where if you fall within this category, you're administrative. If you fall within, you know, this category, you are subject to minor design review. And if you fall into this category, you're subject to major design review. So
someone's not walking in with a 60-foot tall building with a density bonus and 100 and 200 units and walking through with a hall pass to go get themselves a building permit. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the only caveat I would add to that is that we still have this SB 35 just kind of hovering over us, and so.
Oh, those state laws, we don't need to worry.
But no, there is a process that applicants would still have to go through depending on what their application looks like.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions of staff? All right, then we'll open the public hearing. Do any public comments out there? Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak? And is Steve available to host that, or someone else?
Let's remind the public, if they would like to participate in calling in and vocalizing their comments or their concerns. To do so, you're going to want to press *9. And that eventually, what that does is it raises a virtual hand. At that point, you will be called on And to unmute yourself, you'll want to hit *6. And we ask that you, when you speak, you introduce yourself at the beginning so we know who's speaking. And also, please be mindful of the 3-minute time limit per comment. That would really help out considering this hearing. So while we're doing that, I thought it might be a good time to read some of the chat that has come through on this. So if you'll just bear with me before I grab anybody. I'll read some. This is Kate Powers, excuse me. What is the base height currently zoned in areas that are described as 70-foot base, 90 foot with a height bonus along
The highway. Along the highway?
Yes, along Sunny Base 90, it's along the highway. I feel that the height is too high and out of character with the rest of the downtown. I would like to see heights no higher than current height limits of downtown, and for 2040 zoning anticipates height bonuses being requested. I was told Highway 101 is currently 21 feet high through downtown, 70 feet with height bonuses. Above the highway seems too high. I think base heights should be reduced so that with height bonuses will not create massive buildings in downtown. I have made the same comments at Planning Commission, agree with Stuart. Another panelist meant to send this as a public comment, not to panelists only. This is Kate Powers. It looks like that is the same comment. Move down a little forward. This is from Binky. Is anyone looking at the current proposed permanent traffic changes at Lindaro, 3rd, and Luton's, and the impact on increased pedestrian motorist conflict on Luton's? I noticed in this presentation, Luton's is accurately listed as a primary pedestrian ingress egress downtown. With the large BioMarin Vivillon housing project, how will pedestrians cross 3rd Street to get to downtown? I understand on crosswalk, I think that is one crosswalk is planned at Brooks, but are there plans for a crosswalk at Luton's? Third point, what's being discussed now about 3rd Street rehabilitation project, 3rd Street safety project with relation to this plan? Those projects are moving forward now, and some of the permanent changes don't seem to align with the plan, specifically redirecting all motorists onto Luton's and directly in conflict with pedestrians who are trying to enter the public parking lot at Walgreens. Item 4, is this not going to be something else or remain a parking lot? And how, when and how is best way to communicate our concerns to this board or another? A few more, is 66 feet currently zoned for the area or only proposed for the downtown stationary plan? I'm concerned about views of Mount Tam being lost from the County Civic Center too. Under what circumstances, under what circumstances would a waiver or reduction of development standards regarding setbacks, lot coverage, open space, and parking requirements be allowed? Last one, is anybody looking? No, that's
the same one.
Yep, duplicate. Okay, why don't we move back to taking some calls. So person with the last four digits on their phone number of 8552. You have your hand up. You have the ability to talk.
Unmute yourself.
You'll want to press *6. There you go.
Hi there. My name is Brad Sears, and I'm concerned about the property on the corner of 4th and E. You referred to that as bookends. It's on a promontory. It's the highest spot on 4th Street. And I know that the property's been sold. if anything over four stories goes up there, it's going to block my view of Mount Tam on the large Victorian on Fifth Avenue. I'm concerned about that. Perhaps you could comment on that. I see the most resistance if to this entire plan. If something really gargantuan goes up there, it's going to be seen from everywhere. It's probably not a good look, really, if you're trying to sell density. And my other comment is, if you're trying to get RENA numbers, why are you concentrating on the downtown to pull these numbers out? How come south of 2nd Street and the so-called industrial district, which has no welding shops anymore and is misnamed, it's mostly wholesale and construction, retail, and cars. Let's see, I have another couple of comments here. But the main thing is the topography of the 4th and East site. Anything over 4 stories is going to be seen from everywhere, all the way up the Sun Valley, all over town. I think if I could get an answer on that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brad, thank you for your comments. Is there anybody else that had any, would like to make a public comment on this agenda item? Or have a question? Very well.
No,
Nope,
you don't see any others, Steve?
none with their hand up.
All right, then we will close the public hearing. And are there any follow-up questions from the board to staff? Hearing none, I would like all the board members to provide us with any comments they have. So, Sarah, would you like to start?
Sure. So in looking at, all the work that's been done on, this precise plan, I guess the way I'm going to structure my comments are kind of in the vein of, if the DRB is enforcing based on Chapter 9, what, do we need to see as a part of that chapter in order for it to be not enforcing, but recommending, reviewing in light of Chapter 9. I'm not clear on how sea level rise is incorporated into the development standards. It looked like a lot of the diagrams, had that street level going straight through. So that seems impactful to both level 1 height and how those first stories get incorporated. So that's something I'm interested in seeing more guidance on. And then in terms of parking, I think, what we've been talking about a lot with the density bonuses is additional height. And I think, in looking at reductions of parking and maybe sacrificial first levels as ways to accommodate sea level rise, how does that, could that also be a trade-off that may be in lieu of height for some of these projects would be something I would want to think about. And then in terms of use, I guess I have some questions on kind of, where retail is going in the future and seeing a lot of developments that are also open to more commercial or life science uses, and hoping that, this in some way kind of captures some of that new thinking that's coming out of, really the last year of the pandemic. So I think those are my initial thoughts. Thanks.
Any response from staff? These questions?
So starting with sea level rise, I think that's a topic that's come up several times. The sea level rise topic is kind of a bigger question. It is discussed in the general plan and is part of the draft DIR, which in fact is being circulated right now for public comment. So I don't know if Barry is able to chime in or Paul able to chime in on that topic. do you want me, Paul, do you want me to finish the other items, or do you want to just jump in at this point? Okay. And yes, DRB would be part of the review process, similar to the way we bring projects to you now. Like I said, it's, it just depends on the type of project and the level of review. In terms of the sacrificial first level, I mean, that's a good thought. I think, I don't know that we've explored that, and whether there's any opportunity for that in this, kind of rethinking the plan. Right now, what we're looking at is the way the plan is structured. It tries to bring forward retail or commercial type uses to the lower level, and attempts to push parking areas behind the street level, so that there's some sort of buffer between those two, but something we can definitely look into, whether there's opportunity there to address some of the impacts of sea level rise.
Can I ask a question? Can I jump in? What is the base flood elevation downtown now?
I don't have that answer. Do you have that available, Paul? I don't have that answer, sorry.
No, I don't have that, but I can tell you this. The southeast portion of downtown is within the FEMA 100-year flood zone, and it's probably represents, it's up to around 2nd Street and reaches close to Lindaro. And so there are portions of downtown that are definitely part of the FEMA flood zone, the 100-year flood zone, and equally susceptible or vulnerable to sea level rise. And I do want to touch on that point because we specifically asked Opticos to take a look at this. And there are a couple of things in the plan that address this particular topic, and also in the greater general plan update. And I'm going to start with the greater general plan update. We have a series of policies and programs in the greater general plan, which call for requiring a higher finished floor elevation for construction within areas that are vulnerable to sea level rise. And I believe it's adding 3 feet above the FEMA flood control standard. That's the recommendation that's been identified as a potential program in the general plan that would apply to some of these areas in the southeast portion of the downtown area that would be vulnerable to sea level rise. Secondly, there are some opportunity areas for adaptation within the plan that have been considered, including areas around Mahone Creek and its convergence with the San Rafael Creek. And I think Stefan could probably touch on that. So it's part of the greater general plan, and then some issues that are more granular to the precise plan itself.
Thank you, Paul. Does Stefan have anything to add to that?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, hopefully you can still hear me. I want to point to in chapter 2, page 29 provides a snapshot of estimated flooding due to sea level rise conditions within the downtown, taking into account the impacts of a 100-year storm surge. And what we're seeing is that the greatest impacts for flooding are centered around the San Rafael Creek channel and the inlets into that. And so the plan does sort of discuss ways that creek channel can be hardened and raised above future flood levels in a way that can establish a barrier for development that is essentially sort of out of the floodplain. And I think to Paul's point about thinking about Mahone Creek and San Rafael Creek and looking for areas where additional water retention can occur, that can actually help protect the downtown from the impacts of both high tide events in the future, king tide events, as well as high rainfall events where a large amount of rainwater needs to get out of downtown and might be impacted or limited by its ability to do so because of tidal conditions. So the plan sort of discusses those things and sort of thinks about ways that those creek channels can actually become greater repositories for water to manage and limit the other areas of the downtown that would otherwise be susceptible to flooding.
Okay.
Larry, can I say a few more things?
Sure, sure. I was going to ask you if you had other questions.
Okay. No, thanks, Paul and Stefan. I think that helps. That larger level kind of planning or thinking about sea level rise is really something that clearly has been included in the plan. And I guess I feel like that's much more important that it's incorporated than what I'm concerned about is when you're elevating individual finished floors of buildings, especially in a retail environment, the confusion that it causes both for accessibility and access and outdoor dining opportunities and all of these things is really just kills that pedestrian experience in a lot of ways and makes it really challenging. So I think those larger level strategies are really important to for the success ultimately of the plan. So thank you.
You okay, Sarah, then?
Yep.
Great.
Good, thanks.
How about
Larry,
Jeff?
to answer your question, BFE is about 10. Elevation 10.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought it was like 9 or something like that. So
Yeah, it seems to be the current FEMA map kind of doesn't hit 4th Street until the west side of the east side of the freeway, and then it's kind of more concentrated more down on 2nd.
it sounds like there's a plan to mitigate that by the creeks,
Yeah.
and the southeast part of the thing. So, well, as long as you're up, do you have some questions, Stuart?
No, I mean, I alluded to my concerns in the comments. I feel like I get a little bit of heartburn on the sites on the western side of town. I don't really feel good about this notion of bookends, quote unquote, to bookend the West End. I don't, it's a gentle transition into the West End, and as we head down that direction, so we don't necessarily need 2 big bookends. And so those are my comments. I don't know how that steers suggestion. It sounds from Ali like there has been some maybe concern or ask to take a closer look at some of these areas. So I would ask the same thing. I think it was just opportunistic to say, hey, these are the 2 biggest sites, and because they're the 2 biggest sites, they can command the 2 largest buildings. I don't really subscribe to that thinking. So I would ask or hope that just gets looked at and revisited, because it is a gentle transition as we head down towards this part of town and on the west side. So I would feel, I definitely wouldn't like to see structures that tall. Maybe the code already supports that, like you guys said. So I don't know if I want to embolden that though. So I don't know what the language is here. I don't know what touches we get as a city, long gone after I'm on the design review board. I hope someone's minding the store on those areas and make sure that we don't all look back 20 years and say, oh my God, we made a gigantic mistake, because those things will be here. We don't need monuments on where the West America site is, and we certainly don't need a monument where the old Yardbird site was. It was a grocery store, for crying out loud. It doesn't need to be a 60-foot tall residential building. That's
Thank you,
my
Stuart.
very personal and colored opinion. That's my job, right?
Tell us how you really feel, Stuart.
Yeah, just take a look, please.
How about you, Jeff? Do you have any questions for the staff?
I have a few comments.
All right, well then go comment.
So much as
We'll
questions.
go right into comments. I think we've got.
I mean, I certainly agree with what I've heard from other board members, and I agree with Stuart on the feeling the need for the bookending. But it's a very, very ambitious plan. I think the form-based code makes a lot of sense. There's a heck of a lot to unpack here, and And one of my big concerns was the one that Stuart already voiced, was that, what is the design process going forward? And it's good to see that we're still going to be looking at individual sites and perhaps with an eye towards the city's goals of meeting their housing and their housing goals and the goals for more jobs. One thing that wasn't mentioned at all was Sustainable San Rafael had a submission, and I thought there was a lot of really great observations in there that should be looked at. And pretty much as a lot of this has to do with buildings getting taller, and I would just make sure that we're really doing the solar studies and that we're making sure we're not destroying the pedestrian experience. Trees are going to be a real important part of this process. I know we sort of have kind of an approach to just throw a tree in a little concrete cutout and hope it survives. But I think trees are a real critical part of this. So they should be looking at, sustainable structural soils and such, that to make sure that these trees actually survive. And we should also be looking at deciduous trees. So in the wintertime, we can get some more sun into these areas and maybe see if we can get some of the taller buildings even on the north side of the street, so we don't have these shade canyons in the winter time. So, so for the most part, those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. As far as my comment, I was just concerned primarily with the extra height possible along the west side of the freeway, Netherton corridor. And that's why I expressed interest in if there was a way that there could be some flexibility so that we wouldn't ultimately create a wall there. And I was also thinking, if I guess I was wondering why there wasn't more height considered on the east side of the freeway in the Montecito area. It seemed like there was an opportunity, or there is an opportunity there to create more height that would not be as objectionable to a lot of people. But other than that, those are my comments. And I think we've heard from the DRB now, so we can close that item and go on to the third and last public hearing agenda for tonight. That's agenda item number 4. So thank you very much for all your participation on that. We'll go on to agenda number 4.
Through the chair, if you will.
Yes.
Stefan and Barry, did you get what you were looking for, or is there anything that you have any questions for the board? Specific comment you were looking for, or input at all?
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Barry.
Oh, awesome. Okay, great. Thanks. No, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you for the feedback. It was, really helpful. There were a couple of public comments, and I just wanted to say the timeline for and next steps, because I think that's important for folks to know. We have an EIR that's circulating right now that is the comment period closes on March 9th. There is also a planning commission hearing that'll cover the downtown precise plan on March 9th. There will likely be another planning commission hearing in April on both the general plan and the downtown precise plan. We are hoping to bring this forward to the city council by the end of May, possibly into June. But it is not a done deal. And so a lot of the feedback that we're hearing from the DRB and from the public is still going to shape the outcome of this plan. There are some revisions that we're working on now. Some of the ideas Sustainable San Rafael provided will be incorporated. Some of the traffic and circulation ideas will be incorporated. We are looking at the height bonuses and the heights. So this is all fluid at this point. And I just wanted to say, those folks who want to comment, all of the information is on sanrafael2040.org. And if you go to that website, there are links to both review the documents and to comment on the documents. And we do encourage folks to do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Barry. So let's move on to the agenda item number 4 now. Do we have a staff report from Steve?
Yes, we do. Thank you.